You know, I can't really blame Jack for being concerned. Going from Doctor Who fandom to Star Wars fandom is a bit like finally climbing out of a septic tank and deciding to rinse off in another septic tank. Thank you, any Star Wars fans who are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. But what can I say? Clone Wars has its hand in my pocket and I don't have the heart just yet to slice that hand off. 3 shorts centered around Count Dooku and Ahsoka Tano. Characters I'm invested enough in. Dooku in particular I've always thought was pretty interesting. Part of it I will grant is just the aesthetics. But he's always been unique in terms of the Sith in regards to his motivations. Maybe it's because you could see how an actual person could arrive at his conclusions. But I'm not too sure how much this series brought to the table. I kind of felt like I already knew all of this from the starter menu of Attack of the Clones, if not the main course that was Clone Wars. And like this food analogy, the first episode started good. His first encounter with the flaws in the Republic that will eventually drive him away from it. I can see how that pitch would work. But the Count's frustrations with having his hands tied by Jedi politics is a bit of a problem here because he's kind of allowed to do what he wants here, isn't he? Granted, he's stopped from killing a senator, and he does wonder at the end whether he's made any real impact, but he was still pretty much able to act with complete impunity. The episode after that feels like a bit more refined version of this setup. It blurs the lines a bit. Windu levels a complaint at Dooku, saying that ego was what got the senator killed. It's an echo of the complaints he'll one day level at Dooku's killer. You have to wonder if Windu doesn't just use this criticism of every Jedi that doesn't meet his standards. But at the same time, he is kind of right. Surely the Council could have just sent someone else to investigate. Dooku could have just done his job and gotten out. Like all the prequels' Rogues Gallery, Dooku is meant to reflect Anakin. In this case, both of them were pretty right about the criticisms of the Republic, but the audience is never invited to take them as viable alternatives because of their own toxicity. Anakin has fascist tendencies and Dooku is a literal count. Yeah, the privilege there kind of speaks for itself. Both of them are capable of recognizing the galaxy's problems, but the only solution they can conceive of is to sell their soul to George Bush and become the most powerful person ever. There's a lot of continuity porn in this series. Dooku's final episode in particular is basically a checklist for things we know that happen around this point. Wiping the library records, Camino, clones and Cypher Dyas getting name-dropped, Obi-Wan Kenobi getting name-dropped, Qui-Gon's encounter with Darth Maul, Qui-Gon's death. I always thought Clone Wars was at its best when it was being a bit sacrilege with the canon. In a normal narrative, you'd expect Qui-Gon Jinn to be filling in the role of Yaddle. The one with whom Dooku has a clear, defined relationship and has been in the series before. That feels like it would have the most dramatic weight, but because this has to work within the space of the prequel trilogy, we get this. I like Dooku having to kill someone to become a Sith Lord, just like Sidious demanded of Anakin and Luke. While this begins with Dooku already betraying the Jedi, it does emphasize that Qui-Gon Jinn's death was something of a last straw. But I really think for this to land as well as it could have done, we needed to either focus on his relationship with Yaddle or his relationship with Qui-Gon. You could argue they did the latter in episode 2, but really shave off a couple of lines and you don't really get much insight into their relationship there. Would Dooku have betrayed Palpatine in order to save Qui-Gon from Maul? Does he blame Obi-Wan? Does he resent Palpatine more or the Council more? These are questions worth answering. Ahsoka's are a bit more scattershot. The first one comes before the Dooku trilogy, and I'm honestly not quite sure what the purpose of it even is. The problem with prequels is that by design, they're full of stuff you don't need to see to enjoy the original story, and so when you make prequels of prequels, that danger can double. I feel like whatever this was going for bounced off of me. There's vague mystic platitudes about respecting life, but ultimately it just boils down to which of the many random incidents to pick from led to Ahsoka being discovered as a Jedi. I don't even remember her parents' names. Practice makes perfect is probably my favourite. Yeah, explaining away how Ahsoka survived Order 66 is a concession to the fans who care that much about power levels, especially when it comes to female characters. I really thought you'd learn your lesson on that front, Disney. But what makes it for me is the morally ambiguous framing of Anakin during the drills. While it may have saved her life, how grueling Anakin is making this in the name of protecting her is played just insidious enough in my opinion. The guy can't have a fully healthy relationship with anyone. Sadly, the last episode is also a bit of a damp squib. Honestly, I would have just spent the whole episode at Padme's funeral. A short story about grief, but instead we get the bare bones of that Ahsoka novel. And honestly, given the first episode, wouldn't it have made more sense if she went back to her parents following Order 66? That way I might finally be able to learn these guys' names. Who are you? Who are you? I'm probably sounding way more harsh than I mean to. I still love this animation style, and Corey Burton in particular seems to be relishing playing these early versions of Dooku. They're fun enough to watch, they don't outstay their welcome. If Star Wars is going to do continuity porn, this is probably the perfect format to do it in as opposed to one of its live action shows. Speaking of which, I probably would have been a lot happier if I just checked out Andor, wouldn't I?